There's been a partisan food fight over voting rights in the mainstream media. Biden and the Democrats are furious with Republicans for opposing voting rights, while Republicans accuse Democrats of launching personal attacks, twisting the debate away from underlying policy.
Former presidential candidate Marianne Williamson suggests a different problem is at the root of the matter: uninspired voters. She tweeted it's not the GOP effort to suppress the vote, but rather Dems' failure to drive voters to the polls, adding, the most powerful antidote to voter suppression laws would be for Biden to give people something to vote for. Former presidential candidate, activist, and author Marianne Williamson joins us to discuss this further. Marianne, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for having me. It's always wonderful to be with you. And so obviously, this kind of thing is always on a spectrum, right? If you think, during Reconstruction, after Reconstruction, there were still ways to vote, but the suppression was, violent, murderous, terroristic. And so at some point, the suppression overwhelmed the will to vote, especially when a kind of full-on legal regime of Jim Crow is brought in. So you move down the spectrum to where we are today. Obviously, we're nowhere near that situation. So where do you put the kind of balance at laws and obstacles that are put in place to make it harder to vote, balanced against Democrats not really giving people any reason to come out? Well, the violent suppression of voting rights that you described was answered in 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. And then in 2013, the Supreme Court, the John Roberts-led Supreme Court, gutted the Voting Rights Act. So while it's not a violent suppression, suppression is suppression. But there are two categories. There are two main categories of voter suppression law. One is that they're trying to bump people off the voter rolls, obviously. But there's another category, and that is diminishing the access. Let's say you have a rural community where there have traditionally been 7 polling places. So now they're going to limit it to 1 polling place. So technically people can still vote, but it's going to be a lot harder. So the answer to that on the part of Democrats has to be doing so much for people that it feels worth it to them to drive no matter how long to get to the polling place, to stand in line even if it's 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours in order to be able to vote. That's what I mean by the greatest antidote to some of this is to make sure that people have something to vote for. If you do not keep your promises, then that's going to be a really difficult thing to get people inspired around. That's why the president declaring a medical emergency, expanding Medicare to everyone so that people would have something to vote for you for. The president canceling college loan debt so that people would have something to vote for you for. The president declassifying marijuana from a Schedule I drug so that people don't live with that horrible suppression. Talk about suppression. Talk about the hundreds of thousands of people who are in jail today, prison today on marijuana-related charges. So if you don't inspire people, how do you say to people who can't even afford their car payments that they should be grateful because the roads have been fixed?
Yeah. Yesterday at Biden's press conference, the president was asked why he's trying so hard to pull the country so far to the left. Here's his response.
I don't know what you consider to be too far to the left, if in fact we're talking about making sure that we had the money for COVID, making sure we had the money to put together the bipartisan infrastructure, making sure we were able to provide for those things that in fact would significantly reduce the burden on working class people, but they have to continue to work hard. I don't know how that is pulling it to the left. If you may recall, you guys have been trying to convince me that I am Bernie Sanders. I'm not. I like him, but I'm not Bernie Sanders. I'm not a socialist. I'm a mainstream Democrat, and I have been. And mainstream Democrats have overwhelmed me. If you notice, the 48 of the 50 Democrats supported me in the Senate on virtually everything I've asked.
Marianne, in a recent interview with Andrew Yang, you expressed this idea that the duopoly or two-party system is actually a monopoly and that Congress isn't really that divided over things at the bottom line. By denying Bernie Sanders, is he huddling up to the larger monopoly you're referring to?
Yes, I found it very sad, those comments by the president, to buy into that propaganda about socialism. Yeah, if Bernie Sanders were president, he would have done the things that would now be inspiring people to go to the polls to vote for Democrats in 2022, because Bernie Sanders would have provided Medicare for all by now. Bernie Sanders would have declassified marijuana. Bernie Sanders would have canceled the college loan debt. So what's happening here is that we are seeing that the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, certainly under this president and under current corporatist leadership in the Democratic Party, is more often than not basically performative. Even with the Biden presidency, with any modern Democrat, just as with the Republicans, pharmaceutical companies are allowed to keep prices high for the American people, much higher than for people in other advanced countries. Oil companies are continuing to rape our country. President Biden has allowed as much drilling on public lands as Trump did. Insurance companies are still able to make sure we don't have universal health care. And military contractors, whether it's Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or Boeing, they're just doing great. President Biden has actually seen an increase in the defense budget. There are so many ways. I mean, what is the real difference between Blinken and Pompeo? When you look at the fundamental differences, yes, it's that Blinken says the right things. He tweets the right things. But under Blinken, as with Pompeo, we are continuing to see arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Yemeni children are continuing to be bombed. And no matter how much Blinken talks about the glory of press freedom, they are continuing to try to extradite Assange and ruin, if not destroy, his life. They are continuing, much like you'd think a Republican would, to support companies like Chevron in their prosecution of people like Stephen Donziger. So those who want to see the Democratic Party return to its core values, not because they don't like the Democrats, not because they don't want the Democrats to win, but because we do want the Democrats to win in 2022, are urging this president, as well as the corporatist leadership within the Democratic Party, to return to those values, do the things that actually represent an unequivocal support for the working people of the United States. And
I'd add to your good list that they're also starving millions of people in Afghanistan to death for no reason other than spite. It seems now both Biden and Trump, have gotten really rough treatment from the press, from the mainstream press. Donald Trump, though, used that very much to his advantage. He would basically tell the public, "You don't like these guys, and they don't like me, so therefore you must like me." Biden's response has been completely different. It's to complain and be sad about the way that the media is treating his presidency. I get the sense that Bernie would have handled it differently, but maybe not, because he's still within the Democratic Party. Do you think Bernie would have been able to handle the kind of assault that would have come from the press in a better way than Biden has?
I don't know. But I know that the Telecommunications Act in 1996 led to this corporatization, this corporate conglomeratization of media. And basically their bottom line is an increase in profit for the stockholders. And they are basically seeing their good, not in public edification, not in actually an intelligent discussion of the news, but rather in this adrenaline-fueled opposition. So it serves the bottom line of most mainstream media to just attack whoever the president is, to make the life hard of whoever the president is, rather than to actually foster the kind of intelligent, respectful debate that would lead this country forward.
Marianne, we so appreciate you being with us.
I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.